But Twitter, yeah, it's a different beast. I'd say I always tell clients that the market sophistication and awareness on Twitter and LinkedIn are just way higher than like Facebook or an Instagram or a TikTok or anything like that. Maximum awareness, maximum sophistication, just the average intelligence of the average user is just so much higher than these other platforms. So it kind of weeds out the kind of low quality creators. And I think that's why less of them are coming on. And that's also what we do best, is we can help kind of flesh out people's ideas and make them actually do well.
Yeah. And before we continue to dive into what you're building at the Birdhouse, going back, because I always like to make sure we highlight everything about your journey, because there's an entrepreneur listening that might be in a certain stage, and hearing that you went through that maybe is the reason they push forward. The Birdhouse wasn't your first ordeal, wasn't your first agency, wasn't your first business. Talk about some of the struggles you went through to get to that product.
Yeah, I mean, I started business when I was 19. I started like day trading because when I was in the military, I was in the National Guard. I joined the National Guard when I was 19. And when I was at training, my friend had showed me like Forex trading on his phone. So that was like my barrier. That was like my entry into kind of internet money. From there, I kind of went down the rabbit hole. I bought my first course. I bought Rich Dad Poor Dad. I kind of went through that whole thing my first year. That's when I started my first blog when I was like 19, 20. Started my first blog, started affiliate marketing, and I kind of just went down the rabbit hole year after year. Started my first agency when I was like 21. I've tried everything. I was drop shipping. I've really bounced around and got a lot of shiny object syndrome, which is probably why I didn't succeed sooner. But yeah, my first agency was, I did an Amazon pay-per-click agency. Then I had an IT consulting agency, which also didn't do very well. I thought that if I did IT and then mixed it with like marketing, I could do something. Nope. But ultimately, I think the big thing is that I didn't know that I had to stick to something. So like I just kept jumping around looking for the quick money, looking to make some money in my first 4 weeks, first 8 weeks. And I always ended up quitting after 2 months. So long story short, my first real success, I did a little bit of success. I was like Facebook drop shipping, and this was 3 years ago, right before like the whole NFT thing. So I did a little bit of Facebook drop shipping. I rolled that money into what was called NBA Top Shot.
Yep.
And NBA Top Shot was my breakout into the NFT scene. Rolled that into like NFTs. I made 6 figures in NFTs.
Shit.
Well, no, it gets worse. And I tried to roll that into like Amazon automation and repeated the same bad habits of just jumping from thing to thing. Rolled that into like this Amazon automation store, lost like 20K. Rolled that into like something else, also lost a bunch of money. Long story short, I moved to New York City with the money and I ended up with zero. And that was like 2021 or 2022. So basically started back from zero in 2022. And I was like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
So that's when I was like, okay, well, I know marketing, I know like info, and I know all these things. Let me just like go on Twitter and scroll a little bit. And that's when I kind of got introduced to copywriting. So I started copywriting on Upwork for like $20 for blogs. And then eventually I discovered, who is my now co-host / friend, JK. And I saw him talking about ghostwriting. I was like, okay, ghostwriting, copywriting, it's like kind of, it seems like a hot thing. I was still kind of falling into the trap of jumping from thing to thing. I was just jumping from copywriting to ghostwriting. I was like, okay, it works out. Long story short, I joined like this low ticket $50 a month community. I basically copied his offer verbatim. It was like $25K for like 10,000 followers, and you basically be ghostwriting for people. I never actually closed that number. I ended up closing like a 1K a month client, a couple of 1K a month clients. One was through Upwork, one was through Twitter DMs. And then eventually I closed like a 6K for like 5K followers like 3 times. And then from there, it just kind of kept snowballing. Elon acquired, and then I just kept iterating the offer. And that's kind of like the origin story.
So, because I mean, shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any entrepreneur that has not experienced that. What would be your 30 seconds of advice to the person that's listening to this right now that's probably on their 5th business?
Yeah, it's sad because like I never learned the lesson. I just finally, like the biggest thing my biggest attribute was that I didn't quit.
Yeah.
Because it ultimately took me, 5-6 years to really get something that worked. Ultimately, like this company was just the first one that really worked on a consistent basis. which I was like, okay, I'm going to hold on for this for dear life. And the reason that worked out is because I didn't quit over those 5-6 years, and I never had a 9 to 5. So like, that's probably like how I succeeded. But my advice to my younger self was stick to the first thing, because it all works, right?
Yeah.
You see a drop shipping millionaire, and you see a day trading millionaire, and then you see a ghostwriting millionaire. Like, you see all these people, and they all work, but the problem is people don't stick to one. So I'd say, like, honestly, I would take a personality test, figure out where my strengths are. Like, for example, I'm an INFP. My strengths are writing and arts. So I would have done that, would have picked copywriting, would have just stuck with it at like 20. So
in like watching some of your old interviews, talking to you now, mentorship courses were a huge part of your success.
Yeah.
Sometimes courses and paid mentorships get a bad rap. What has your experience been, and what would you tell somebody who's on the other side of the camera saying, well, I'm not going to pay somebody $1,000 to learn this?
This is a tough one, right? Because we work with a lot of people who sell courses and education and cohorts and mentorships and stuff like that. And I'm really passionate about the space. I don't even sell one. I don't want to sell one, but I do love the space because it kind of is the reason I am here. I'd say, like, the filter that I've developed at this point is that, I mean, for one, and for what your question was, like, skepticism's fine, but I wouldn't, as long as it doesn't like deter you from like kind of actually chasing your dream. But I think the big thing for me as like a filter is going to someone who is practicing what they preach actively. Because what I see a lot of times is people who come out with these coaching programs is they're selling a coaching program on something they're not doing anymore. And their information becomes very outdated very fast. And one thing nowadays with internet money and online businesses, every industry is changing so fast and so rapidly. You actively have to be in it to truly give good information. So if you're going to buy one of these info products, I think you should be going to someone who's actively doing the thing, and then they're also doing the info business. So like, you know, if you're going to go buy, what's a course that you would buy? I don't know, a podcasting course, right? That person better have a fucking podcast.
Yeah.
It better be a good one, right? So that's how I would use it as a filter.
Yeah, so essentially, like, if I'm looking to buy an e-com course and that guy doesn't own an e-com company
right
anymore.
Like, a lot of times it's like they did e-com to make their first 50K, but now they've done the e-com course to make their next 5 million.
Yeah, and they're not.
It's a huge red flag. But, you know, not everyone has common sense. But I mean, like, if someone is actively, there are some people out there that are actually crushing. I'll even shout him out, like Robert Oliver, I think it is. He's got this Amazon brand.
Yeah.
Crushing it, right? 30 mil exit, crushing it currently. But that's a course I would buy if I was starting.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't work with him, by the way. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But you could say that for a million different courses. There's tons of good ones, but the problem is probably more bad ones.
Yeah.
So I think that there needs to be a free course on how to actually find good courses. I actually thought about this was a good idea as a marketplace for vetted courses. Not something I'm going to do. That's shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
Someone should do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like more of like a filtered down school or a filtered down WAP.
Right.
You have to meet certain requirements to be on that platform, not anybody and everybody.
Well, I think the real problem is that these companies like WAP and School, they're not exactly incentivized to do the vetting.
Yeah.
But ideally they would. It'd be cool, right, if School and WAP were able to deny. Well, they are able to, but it would be cool if they actually did deny people that were scams.
Yeah.
Like, if enough people reported scam, but then, you know, it's a slippery slope. So I think the only practical way is probably like an application system. But yeah,
that's not
the industry's not there yet, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think, where the industry needs to go. I mean, you know, you have Trustpilot, but then again, it's kind of hard to do Trustpilot right away. So
shit, somebody listening, go build a whole personal brand on buying every course and reviewing it and telling people if it's shit or not.
That's actually something I've always wanted to do, is like just 60-day challenges on these courses, or just like
take them.
But then the problem is a lot of times these these biz ops, they're a lot longer term than 30 days.
Yeah.
You know,
it's funny you mentioned Robert Oliver. I follow him. I think I put him up there in my top 5 people I'm making content right now. His content is very captivating, very well done. And when you look at his stuff, you think he's crushing it. And like, I would go and buy that course. But then again, there's that slippery slope for other people where they look good, And like, there's even people that I've met that I see them online and I think of them in this way. And then I meet with them and talk to them and have a conversation. I wouldn't buy their course, or I wouldn't be part of their mentorship. And it is a crazy space. But for you, you've had a really positive experience with that and have had that be one of the main reasons you are in the position you are now.
Yeah, I mean, I bought like, you know, shitty courses like everybody else. I think, like I said, it's about not quitting. I mean, has anyone really like you have to consider yourself very lucky if your first course is just success. Like everyone's bought a shit course that I know. So I bought like a $2,000 course like 2 weeks ago. I haven't even opened it yet. Like, so you know what I mean? Like, I think you have to do your due diligence. I think it's kind of a rite of passage at the moment. Like everyone's bought a course that didn't work out for them, whether it was the course or it was them.
Yeah.
I also find that more often than not, it's on the person and not the course. Like there's a reason, you know, if the statistic holds true that 90% of entrepreneurs fail, then the statistic must hold true that 90% of these biz op courses will fail for you.
Yep.
Right. But it's no fault of the course.
It's you.
Right. So that's part of the slippery slope. And then the problem being is that, you know, half of that 90% are going to say it was a scam or it was bullshit or leave a bad review. And then that's what gives the industry kind of a compounding bad name.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough space because you're putting out a really good product, but all of the success is dictated by the person who's actually actioning what they're learning. And that's an uncontrollable factor. You can't control people taking action. You can't tell people that's that quote, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And that's kind of what the course industry sits at.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, like I said, my girlfriend runs a very successful info business. So I see the behind the scenes of her. I see the behind the scenes of the 15 different clients we have, businesses. And I just know it's like the logistics on an info business at scale it's just so detrimental. And I say more of a business, info business, not just a regular info business. It's because people just fucking suck. People are losers, dude. Like it's so unfortunate, but it's the truth. Like 90% of people are just not meant for it. And the hard truth is that the only way for them to find out that they're not cut out for it is to go through the pain, paying fucking $4K and realizing I'm not cut out for this.
Yeah, I'm just not good enough.
Yeah.
Or I just don't have what it takes.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough scene. I don't know the way forward. I'm leave that one to like school or something or WAP, but I'm just going to be out here promoting the good guys.
Yeah, for sure. So at what point did you start to think there was a real market for the birdhouse? There was a real need for what you offer?
Yeah, I'd say like I started my business in May or maybe August, something like that of 2022. I'd say after 3 to 4 months, I quickly realized that there's definitely a market for growth, but there's a problem in that people aren't patient enough, and I wasn't big enough to target companies who are, you know, allocating millions of dollars a year in funding to pay for my service. So what I quickly realized is that, you know, if you're targeting personal brands, the problem with targeting personal brands, which is who I'm targeting, is that personal brands typically don't have a marketing budget. Mm-hmm. Unless they're the big dogs who are mostly going in-house and not agency. Yeah. So for me to justify a personal brand to afford me, because companies allocate hundreds of thousands in marketing very easy, especially, you know, if you're doing e-commerce marketing. But for me, personal brands, I was like, okay, these guys can't afford me for the most part. And if they do, it's very short LTV because they're churning after they get their first 5K followers, or they're churning even after 10K followers. And you could knock it out of the park for them and hit your guarantee and do all this stuff, but they still didn't make a lot of money, so they're not going to renew with you after you deliver on that initial agreement. Yeah. So I had my first client who was a 3K a month retainer, and this wasn't my first client, but my first 3K client, and he was an info business. He had maybe 18K followers at the time, and he just needed someone to write for him, and I was like, okay, I'll write for you. We helped him crush it and go viral. But what was actually interesting is not only did they go viral and crush it, these people really wanted to track the performance of the sales team on Twitter. So I was like, okay, this is new for me. I'm going to learn a lot about sales. And that's when I kind of was introduced into the whole sales rep, kind of sales team, closers, all this stuff. And And I quickly realized that they are going to make a lot of money off my service for $3K. And they ended up doing, 1 month was like $93K, another month was like $137K.
Holy shit.
And this is cash collected.
At $3K spent was pretty good.
Right. So like, they were freaking out on the channel, and they were sending like all caps, and they were saying like, oh my God, 56x ROAS, like all this stuff. I was like, okay, now I need to figure out how to actually, I didn't think this at the time. I know now, but what I was actually thinking at the time is like, how do I capture more value from this? So a couple clients later, they gave me some referrals because they were really, really happy with us. And I started only targeting personal brands who were going to sell info products. So I was like, okay, if we can crush it for them, we can crush it for others. And that's what we did. And we got our first performance deal after that, percentage deal. Now we're actually capturing more value of the sales. And after that, I was like, okay, this is my new niche. My niche found me.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of went all in with that. That's when I knew I had something. Is when they were making 6 figures in a month from, me writing tweets, I was like, okay, we got something here.
Something's right.
Yeah.
So you get those clients, you start to realize there's a market. What does it look like for you on your end from a business perspective? Like, are you writing a tweet a day, a thread a week? Like, what does that look like? Or is it all tailored to the client?
Yeah. At the time, I was writing 2 tweets a day, one of which was a thread a day. So we were doing 7 threads, a thread every day.
Wow.
And we were doing also a tweet a day. So it was 14 posts a week. Yeah, it was seven a week. We were also doing something called an auto DM giveaway, which is basically like a lead magnet. So we were doing that. And after I got to like 4 or 5 clients, it was pretty much just like wake up, drink. I remember I had a Smeg coffee pot that I think Julia bought it for me. It was a full coffee pot of black coffee. I would drink the entire pot of coffee. I would write tweets. I'd write my personal tweets for my personal brand because my personal brand was taking off at this point. And then I would write all my clients' tweets. I had like 4 or 5 clients at the time. And I'd write from 6 to 12. At 12, I would go to the gym. At 1, I would eat. And then from like 1:30 or 2 to the end of the night, I would take sales calls or client calls, whatever the mixture was. And I just did that every day for like 6 months until I started hiring employees. So nowadays, I'm play much more of a CEO role, it's much more call intensive now. But that was my routine probably for the first 6 to 8 months before I started bringing on my executive assistant and then my first writer.
And just to frame it for the person watching now who maybe is like, well, shit, I want to build a personal brand on X. Let me reach out to Marcos and like get some information. If I went to you right now and said, dude, I'm building this podcast. We're 54, 55 weeks in. I want to start building a personal brand on X. What would some of the requirements that I would need for you to think that it would be successful and worth your time?
To work with us or to build a personal brand in general?
No, like to work with you, because I want to frame it for somebody that might be like, well, I want to use you all.
Well, to work with us, we take the one side of it would be kind of the personal brand who wants to sell some sort of info product or product in general. That's one side of it. And then the other person is the kind of high level 8-9 figure net worth personal brand who just wants to have a voice. So those are really the 2 qualities. I'd say when we're talking about someone who's selling an info product, it needs to be someone who actively, like I mentioned before, someone who actively has that business rolling. And then they also have the info product on the side and they want to build their personal brand and use the info product as kind of like a front. It's like a liquidating funnel. So the info product is good, but they have a real business too. You know what I mean? So like that's kind of the person we're attracting. And the other side of it is if you have any 8-9 figure entrepreneur listeners or business owners, scientists, doctors, anyone like that who wants to build their personal brand, we'd love to have them too.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully we could shake the tree and find a few of those hanging up at the top. So you mentioned LinkedIn as well. Yeah. You're doing it on LinkedIn, very similar platform, but people kind of look at it as a more business, more formal platform. When did you all start to do LinkedIn?
We added LinkedIn to our service stack in 2024, and just 3 or 4 months ago. And the reason being was, one, it was just highly requested. Clients were asking for it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be referring these people anyways. Might as well just take the money. Then what I realized is it's not that hard to get results. We're already writing the content. We just kind of have to repurpose it. So also I heard what really pushed me over the edge was for two reasons. One, my friend Lara Acosta, she's like a LinkedIn guru. She was pushing it a lot. And then also Gary Vee was pushing it a lot. So all the voices getting in my head, I'm referring clients to other ghostwriters. I'm like, okay, let's just add this service. So that was the reasoning behind it. But in general, like kind of the bull case for LinkedIn is that it's becoming more of a content platform and less of a job board now.
Yep.
Video, hashtags, long form posts, networking. Like there's a lot going on over there. It's definitely the more B2B centric platform. But for who most of our clients are targeting, it still works out. Like I'm not exactly working with people targeting like 18-year-old, 19-year-old Rolex kids. Like that's not really who we really work with for the most part. So LinkedIn was a good opportunity.
And are you bullish on LinkedIn going forward? I mean, obviously it's part of your brand, but is it, I guess I don't want to ask that question. I want to ask more of like my tweet or my content on Twitter. How different is it when I go to LinkedIn, or is it just something that's a simple repurpose?
It depends on the person. If you're just going to be talking about podcasting, it's a simple repurpose. I'd say Twitter, you have more of the kind of unlimited tweets limit where you could just kind of shower thoughts, say what's on your mind, conversational, whereas LinkedIn is more broadcast, put out structured posts. I'd say the way we like to look at it is the structured posts that are going to go on X can go also on LinkedIn. I wouldn't put, half of the tweets I put out on X on LinkedIn. But anything that's structured, client results, testimonials, educational posts, stuff like that, even stories, I'll put those on LinkedIn.
Got it. We talked before we started rolling that you just went to a acquisition.com event with Alex Hormozy. Alex Hormozy has a really awesome, and luckily he's got a massive audience, so this works for him, but he mentions that he doesn't have a notebook. He just tweets all of his thoughts and ideas out.
Right.
And then at the end of the week, we'll audit which one's got the most engagement and then just make content on that.